how do we actually, see illness these days? I mean, if you stop and think about it, so much of our perspective might come from just scrolling through social media. These spaces are often talked about as places for personal stories, maybe empowerment around health issues. But is that the whole story? Today, in this deep dive, we're going to explore exactly that, how mainstream social media is, well, shaping the visuals of illness.
Mm.
We're focusing specifically on hereditary cancer syndromes, like BRCA. And we're unpacking a recent study, a pretty big one, that analyzed thousands of popular images, trying to see what's really being shown.
Right. And our mission here is really to understand if these visuals, the ones we see scrolling by, are they actually challenging the old ways we think about illness? Or are they maybe more often just reinforcing the norms we already have? Just for context, BRCA genes, when mutated, significantly raise the risk for certain cancers, especially breast and ovarian. So it's a really important area to look at visually.
Okay, so let's dive into this study. It looked at BRCA-related images across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, well, X now. And what's really striking is how different sort of visual languages popped up on each platform.
That's absolutely right. You saw distinct patterns. So on Facebook and Instagram, the visuals, they tended to have people in them, human elements, or usually text alongside. Like on Facebook, you'd often see things about celebrities, maybe Christina Applegate's BRCA story. That got a lot of traction. Or sometimes BRCA was used almost like a general metaphor for genetic risk, kind of like you'd see in maybe tabloid discussions about genes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then Instagram, that felt, well, really different again, didn't it? Very much about personal branding. You might see someone sharing their IVF process after BRCA or documenting their cancer recovery, but often through these like very carefully staged inspirational selfies.
Exactly. Highly curated. But then you switch over to Twitter.
Completely different.
Totally different vibe. Twitter's popular stuff was heavily skewed towards scientific visuals, screenshots from academic papers, graphs, data, infographics. It really framed BRCA as more of a scientific, maybe even an academic topic, almost like a space for professionals to network or share research findings, not so much personal stories in the same way.
That contrast is stark, isn't it? It really tells you something about who's using each platform and maybe why. So, okay, bringing it all together then. Across all these platforms, these thousands of images, what were the main visual themes the study identified? Seems like there were two big categories.
Yeah, basically two major visual genres emerged. You had images that were explicitly picturing the BRCA body, showing the physical side, and then you had others that were more about verbalizing BRCA cancers and genes using text, data, that sort of thing. Now, looking at those body-focused images, while, yeah, a lot were those curated selfies, often showing glamour or, good health post-treatment, there were some important details in there, too.
Right, like those autopathographic images you mentioned, sort of visual diaries, they give you this raw glimpse into the actual physical experience, maybe showing women wearing masks or bandages after surgery, IV drips, that kind of thing.
Powerful stuff.
And really notably, there was that one image, just one in the whole popular data set showing a man with mastectomy scars, which is huge for visibility around male breast cancer, something we just don't see talked about much publicly.
A tiny crack of visibility there. But it does raise that big question. Does any of this really signal a true disruption of the old ways of seeing illness? The study's conclusion is, well, maybe not so much. While you do see some examples of what they call silly citizenship, using humor, maybe irony, to kind of poke fun at assumptions.
Yeah, sort of challenging things indirectly.
Exactly. But the overall dominant visual trend seems to primarily reinforce or even exacerbate existing biases around race and gender.
How so?
Well, the focus was overwhelmingly on the white female breast, either looking healthy or reconstructed after surgery. There was a real lack of other representations. You didn't really see non-white bodies featured prominently or images showing, say, flat closures after mastectomy as an aesthetic choice, which, as the study notes, is quite unlike some earlier feminist art projects from like the 70s or 90s that were actively trying to be subversive.
So it's not pushing boundaries in the same way.
It seems not, on the whole. The researchers describe this as creating a liminal space of imagination.
Liminal meaning like in between.
Yeah, exactly, like a threshold. These images hint that maybe there are new ways to think about BRCA, but they don't really go all the way. They aren't truly radical or disruptive, generally speaking. Often they fall back on that familiar trope of the responsible, beautiful, likable warrior fighting disease.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also really constrained by the attention economies of these platforms, right?
Right.
What gets likes, what gets shared, that tends to favor certain kinds of polished, positive, or maybe scientifically authoritative images. So real disruption. It seems to be just a tiny fraction of what's actually popular online.
So this deep dive really highlights something quite profound, I think. Social media gives us these incredibly powerful tools for expressing ourselves about health, sharing stories. But the visuals that actually rise to the top, the dominant narratives, they still seem to align pretty closely with the established ways society already views and categorizes illness, what the study calls disease regimes.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does all this constant self-sharing, this visual documentation of health online, how does that tangle up with, say, commodification or even health entrepreneurship? And maybe for you listening, as you scroll through your own feeds, how might knowing this change how you interpret the health images you encounter every day? It adds another layer to consider.